Jack had noticed that, although George was wearing casual clothes, the way that he was being treated by those members of the top 5 families was absolutely different. He had seen that there were several other youths that came from other big families of Incoet. But all the same, their families couldn't compare to the big 5. William and the others seemed not to be paying much attention to them. But George was different. The group could enthusiastically chat with him. And what's more, the way they treated him was like he was their equal, and sometimes he could feel that they had some sense of respect for him. A good example of the treatment would be Ismail. If it was another person of Incoet that wasn't in good terms with him, he was sure that Ismail would have already looked for ways to make sure that person went down. But to George, other than throwing his mouth off, he did nothing else. So it was obvious to Jack that George was hiding his real identity. But what identity was it? George was stunned by Jack's question. He hadn't expected that Jack would ask something like that. But after a moment, he smiled bitterly as he thought to himself, "Oh, how can I forget that someone like him isn't simple?" After a moment of silence, George finally spoke. "To tell you the truth, I'm a member of Dante family. I'm the second son." George's reply was absolutely out of Jack's expectations. He had thought that George's identity wasn't small. Who knew that George was the second son of the largest family, the overlord of Incoet City, Dante family, the owners of Dante Corporation? Although Jack was startled by the answer, the only reaction that was shown on his face was raising his brows a little. This reaction made George admire him more. He kept wondering, what did Jack experience for him to have such a stable mentality? As for the reason as to why I'm out there, it's to fulfill my end of a bet. I had bet with Ismail about 5 years ago that the one that lost the bet would stop using their family's influence for 5 years. I lost the race and was banned from racing for 5 years. Upon seeing that Jack was listening, George continued, "There's only a month before I can finish the price that I had to pay for losing the bet. To be exact, I only have 27 days till the end of it." George said all of this with some hint of dejection. Jack finally understood why the group could engage George. Furthermore, George was an easygoing person. He didn't put on the airs of a young master from the biggest family of a city at all. What made Jack admire him the most was the fact that he had been doing delivery work for almost 5 years, and he'd never gone back on his words. He made sure to keep his end of the bet. As for his character at work, he was truly determined to complete all the duties that had been assigned to him. So, Jack finally understood why he saw the name Dante on George's name. George was a low-profile person. So, even those that had given George the delivery work didn't know of his identity. Even Jack didn't link the two together. "So, after the month is up, what are you going to do?" Jack asked. "I guess I'll stay with boss. I need to learn from you how to drive like a professional. Before going back to the racing competition, I'll have to improve my skills," George stated after a moment of silence. Jack turned and gazed at him for a moment before nodding. "Okay then. If there's something that you need my assistance in, ask and I'll help whenever I can." George smiled. He knew that Jack wasn't simple. As a member of Dante family, he knew all too well about Brenda and Steve. He knew that all those that had gone against them in the past had suffered a considerable loss. But now, Jack was facing the two of them at the same time. But he didn't seem like a person that was getting overwhelmed. This implied that Jack had a way to deal with them. For that reason, George decided that he was going to maintain the relationship between them. After about 40 minutes of driving, he finally arrived at the palace. The traffic on the road had caused them to arrive after a longer period of time than when they were leaving the city. The reason for this being that, currently, it was 8 p.m. At this time, traffic was quite high. So, although Jack had made use of the not-so-popular roads, he still experienced traffic at the roundabouts that connected these roads to the busy highways. Of course, Jack made sure to send George home first before returning to the palace. Although Jack knew that George was a member of the Dante family, he wasn't going to help him in going against the bet that he made. If George wanted to use his family influence to get to live a better life, he would have done so. And since he didn't, then Jack helping him because of his family influence was something that he wouldn't do. The guards opened the gate as soon as they saw the Bentley's familiar registration number. They bowed to him as they welcomed him. Jack nodded to them before he parked the car in the parking lot. After getting into the mansion, he headed straight to his bedroom. Although the Bentley was quite comfortable to sit in unlike other sports cars, but sitting inside the Bentley Continental GT for over an hour had made him feel tired. This made him think of starting to drive the SUVs instead. But that would have to wait as currently, Jack wanted to see what rewards the system had given him. After taking a shower, he changed into his pajamas before laying on his back on the bed. Then, he stared at the system prompts that he'd received when he was on Mount Bright. Flyers Bank Savings Account received $10 million. Current balance is $36,790,607. You've earned $10 million. Multiplier applied. You've received $1 billion. First income. As a reward, you gain a customized Eurocopter EC-135. System task completed. Professional driving skill now permanently belongs to the host. He then took out his phone. There, he confirmed that he'd received another message. Flyers Bank Savings Account received $990 million. Current balance is $1,026,790,607. Looking at the huge balance, Jack decided that he needed to do something. It would be good to see some strings of zero instead of seeing so many numbers. With that thought, he decided that he would open another account. This new account would be the one that would be used by the financial department of the grocery department. Since he was still in the starting phase, he still needed more money. But with over $1 billion, he could settle everything the following day. Then, there was something that made him more excited. That was the fact that, with the completion of the system's task, the professional driving skill was now his permanently. In other words, he was going to remain as the driving deity Jack. He wondered when he would receive another mission with a reward of skills. If he got something like business management, he would be able to ensure that his enterprise was making enough money. No, it should be maximizing the enterprise's profits and reputation. But he didn't know when the system would give him such a reward again. But he didn't lose hope as the system was still there. He still had things that would be rewarded as the first income reward. Just like the stores that he'd recently bought, the rewards had yet to be given to him. As for the last reward, the Eurocopter EC-135. That was the reward for the first income that he'd received from racing. He was wondering if he could participate in such races in different areas so that he could get even more rewards. But it seemed impossible. The first-time income can only be repeated on the business, where you work to earn a profit, not where you receive the rewards of winning in a hobby. Is there a difference between them? Aren't they income all the same? Jack couldn't help but ask. True, both of them are incomes, but one is a hobby and another needs skills, determination, courage, decisiveness, and connections. There are many risks involved in business that could lead to heavy losses. On the other hand, in racing competitions, other than the registration fee, nothing else is lost if you don't win the race. Jack simply sighed at the system's logic. Then, he thought of something. What about the money that I can win after getting the first position in a race? The restriction is only applied on the first-time income reward. But the multiplier still applies on the money that is earned from racing. After all, this is income. Jack shook his head helplessly. Then, he thought of the Eurocopter. Was it going to be delivered like the Bugatti Veyron was? As soon as this thought echoed in his mind, the system spoke. Since it's night, and the system doesn't like to delay the rewards unless the host asks for it, the Eurocopter was delivered in the palace a long time ago, and the guards have already been dealt with. No worries, you can just fly your Eurocopter freely. Jack was surprised. After all, he'd thought that the system would deliver the Eurocopter the same way the Bugatti was. Who knew that the system listened to his advice? After all, who does car delivery at night if there's no emergency? Where is it? I don't think there's a helipad here. Jack asked. There's one on the roof of the parking garage. Where's a parking garage? Jack asked curiously. He'd never seen one here. Once the walls of the parking lot are raised, the parking lot would become a parking garage. Jack was surprised again. As for the helipad, he didn't know what to say about it. He wondered if Sabrina had forgotten about it, or she didn't know of its existence at all. Jack got out of the bed, forgetting about the tiredness of his body as he rushed towards the parking lot. From a distance, he could see that there was a white Eurocopter with several streaks of blue on top of the roof. Jack hurried his steps and arrived at the parking lot not long after. He tried looking around for a way to get to the Eurocopter that had landed on the roof, but he couldn't find any. System, why is the Eurocopter on the roof? You know, that's poor delivery service. After all, how am I supposed to fly it if I can't even reach it? After getting frustrated from not seeing a method of getting to the roof, he could only complain to the system. There's a way to get there. It's just that you don't know what you bought well. Just raise the walls. Once all the walls are up, there would be a staircase that leads to the top of the garage. Jack couldn't help but complain. How am I supposed to know everything in all of this big compound without spending some time? See, even the one that sold it to me didn't tell me about it. Maybe she didn't know that it existed there. After saying these words to the system, Jack then thought of something important. By the way, system, How did you know that there was a staircase here? Nothing in this blue planet can be hidden from this system. Jack. After pressing the button for the walls to rise, Jack waited for about a minute before everything was in place. Looking at the garage that had been formed, Jack could only admire the designer even more. After all, when the walls were taken down, they would hide below the interlocking tiles that would take their place. But once they were raised, the garage looked no different from a normal-built one. He couldn't even see the places that the four walls joined together. If a person was seeing this for the first time, she would have thought that the walls weren't divided into four. Jack got into the garage. The place was well lit, just like the compound that had no black spots. The lighting inside the garage was faint blue. He didn't know why they had chosen that color anyway. Looking around, he tried finding the staircase that the system had spoken of. But no matter where he looked, he couldn't find it. He had no choice but to ask the system, "You're hopeless." Looking at the door that leads to the garage's back, there should be a switch there. Once pressed, the staircase would be formed. Jack could swear that he had heard the system's robotic voice sighing. But he still agreed that he was hopeless in this situation and could only depend on the system. After arriving at the door that led to the back of the garage, Jack saw that there was indeed a small switch. It had the words "staircase" written on it. After flicking the switch, there was a buzzing sound as the structure of the garage changed. All the cars were moved to the side using the tiles. It was like the ground was opening in the center of the garage. If there was a car that was parked there, it would be moved to the side or it would be placed on a top position of the other cars. These rising tiles were supported by strong steel bars. Jack was surprised that such a system was present in the garage. He couldn't help but wonder how advanced the helipad was. After the ground at the center was opened up, a rotating staircase was raised. Alongside it was a path that could be followed by a car. Just like the staircase, it was winding. The starting position was at the entrance of the garage. It fit well on the open space and that a person might think that it had always been there. Jack got out of his stupor only after seeing that the movements had stopped. He staggered towards the staircase. Looking upwards, he could see that, almost at the edge of the garage's roof, there was an opening. In fact, there were two of them, one for the bigger path and the other for the staircase. Jack climbed the staircase and arrived on top of the roof of the garage. There, he found that the place was quite big when looking at it from this point. But now, there was a customized Eurocopter that was at the center of the roof. The roof itself was well lit by ground bulbs, so, although it was night, he could see the Eurocopter very well. The helipad was just like the others. He couldn't see any difference. Looks like he had his hopes too high for nothing. Then, he wondered to himself, when coming back, he didn't notice this Eurocopter. It wasn't like there were no lights. It was clear as day in the palace. The Eurocopter was delivered only after you had entered the mansion. Finally, Jack nodded in understanding. Then, he stared at the outward appearance of the Eurocopter. The EC-135 had at least a length of 16 m, width of 4 m, and a height of 8 m. The fuselage of the Eurocopter was at least 12 m long. The diameters of main and tail rotors were 11 m and 1 meter respectively. As for the roof where the helipad was, it was 40 by 45. So, although the Eurocopter was wide, it still fit well. The garage where the cars could be parked was only the size of 35 by 36. The extra space was obviously for the walls that could be raised and lowered at will. System, no introduction of the Eurocopter here? Jack asked curiously. This was his first time being closer to an aircraft. He left Crystal City for the first time in his life when he came here in Inchoate City. After a moment of silence, just when Jack thought that the system wouldn't reply, a pile of information was dumped into his mind while the system's voice echoed. EC-135 is a multi-mission twin-engine helicopter manufactured by Eurocopter. The helicopter offers extended range and payload capacities while delivering low-noise operations. The EC-135 helicopter is widely operated by police forces, emergency medical services (EMS), and charter companies. The EC-135 can conduct homeland security, law enforcement, passenger and VIP transport, search and rescue, SAR, and EMS operations. The EC-135 has a length of 16.16 m, width of 4.65 m, and a height of 8.51 m. The fuselage of the helicopter is 12.2 m long. The diameters of main and tail rotors are 11.2 m and 1.4 m respectively. The helicopter can be equipped with a rescue hoist, searchlight, forward-looking infrared, FLIR, camera and LOJAC tracker to support law enforcement missions. The spacious cabin has a volume of 12.9 cubic meters. It has a single level and is provided with unobstructed flat floor, providing a very high load capability of 1,400 kilograms. The wide cabin also offers outstanding visibility for observation operations. The flat floor and rails ensure the users to install medical devices or mission-specific equipment. The two wide sliding doors and the two rear-hinged clamshell doors allow the entry and exit of occupants. The cabin can accommodate 9 to 10 passengers in its standard configuration. The EC-135 is provided with two engine options, including Turbo-Mika Arias 2B2 and the Pratt & Whitney Kaga PW206B2. The two engines are equipped with full authority digital engine control, FADEC, fire detectors, and an overspeed protection system. Each engine develops a maximum takeoff power of 953 kilowatts. The EC-135 can fly at a maximum speed of 543 kilometers per hour. The maximum operating altitude is 25,000 feet. The helicopter can climb at a rate of 5.6 meters per second. Its maximum range with standard tanks is 1,700 kilometers. The EC-135 is customized and performs better than others. It has the name of the current owner, Jack, written on either side of the tail. It has an advanced autopilot system. Accompanying this is an advanced AI that can take simple instructions from the owner. Furthermore, it can use the owner's biological data to ensure the Eurocopter's anti-theft security. Jack hadn't expected that the system would give him so much information at once. He almost felt that his head was going to burst from the overloaded information. After taking a deep breath, he felt that he was no longer feeling dizzy. Now, as he focused his gaze onto the Eurocopter, he could gain some understanding of it. Now that all that was out of the way, Jack wanted to see the interior. According to the system, this aircraft could carry 2 crew members and about 10 passengers. He got closer to the aircraft. As soon as he stretched his hand, touching the handleless door, it suddenly moved to the side before he heard a robotic voice. "Welcome, Master. I am Eco, the EC-135's AI, here at your service." Who knew that the AI was so advanced? Jack then stepped into the EC-135. The space inside was huge. And just like in the system's description, it could accommodate at least 10 people at the same time. He then entered the cockpit. There, he looked at the many buttons that were there. He took a deep breath as he muttered, "Although the Bugatti Veyron also has many buttons, but it is different from this. Eco, can you tell me about this plane?" He shook his head before asking Eco, the plane's AI, about the plane. Eco gave a simple description of the plane. It was no different from what the system had told him. And then, now came a question. How was the plane going to fly? He didn't know how to fly the plane. This was his first time on one. "System, can I get the professional flying skill?" Jack thought of the professional driving skills and asked the system expectantly. No. The professional driving skills were given to you because the emergency mode had been activated. For you to get skills, you'll have to work harder so that you can activate the skill rewards. Jack, what is the use of having a car if you can't drive it? What's the use of having an aircraft if you can't fly it?